Okay, great. All right, good. So everyone, big welcome to Tom. Tom Szaky is kind of I keep telling you guys to just be bold in making the connections that you make in the world. And Tom and I are connected because he accepted a LinkedIn connection from me because I think he's a total rock star. And he started his company TerraCycle in New Jersey. So I'm from New Jersey. So for me, that was Jersey strong, Jersey pride, really excited about that. And then I've been really excited and interested in circular economy and reusable, recycling, all of those types of things in the world. And Tom is really a thought leader there. He is the founder and CEO of TerraCycle. TerraCycle is a global leader in the collection and repurposing of complex waste streams. TerraCycle operates in 21 countries, working with some of the world's largest brands, retailers, and manufacturers to create national platforms to recycle products and packaging that currently go to landfill or incineration. TerraCycle is a lead company in a new circular shopping platform called Loop that enables consumers to shop for some of their most favorite brands in durable, reusable packaging. It was launched just in May of 2019, and Loop is a key step in helping to end the epidemic of waste that is caused by single-use consumption. Tom and TerraCycle have received hundreds of social, environmental, and business awards and recognition from a range of organizations, including the UN, the World Economic Forum, the Schwab Foundation, Fortune Magazine, Time Magazine, and the US Chamber of Commerce. Tom is also the author of 4 books, Revolution in a Bottle, Outsmart Waste, Make Garbage Great, and the Future of Packaging. Tom created, produced, and starred in TerraCycle's reality show, Human Resources, which aired on Pivot from 2014 to 2016, and it's syndicated in more than 20 foreign markets on Amazon and on iTunes. So welcome, Tom. We are just more than thrilled to have you. And I would like to invite Chantal to go ahead and ask you some of her most pressing questions.
Rock on. Thank you. Thanks for the kind intro.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Chantal. I'm from Switzerland, working on a platform for circular economy, trying to enable circular economy in packaging. And we are a few supermarkets, a few big food producers, and a few packaging companies trying to create a new collecting system to enable circular packaging. And my big question is, how do you go through this? What are your experiences with this transition of a whole industry towards circular? And how do you deal with those actors that need waste to be burned in order to produce energy for their production plants and so on?
You mean the competition to the circular economy, right? Yeah, so good question. There's a lot to unpack in that, so let me try to do the best I can, and then you tell me where there's missing pieces. So first and foremost, the important thing to understand, if we think about the physical circular economy, there's many metaphors of circular economy. Let's stay with the physical, which is moving from things being incinerated, which is very common in Europe and other rich markets, or landfilled or informally disposed, depending on the wealth of the country. But let's say linear, to circular, where you can move to more recycling, recycled content, reuse, and even servitize, make the product a service versus a product. That would be sort of your net progression. Now, yes, there are going to be losers in the transition if I go backward. And in the Americas, that would be landfill. In Europe, that would be incinerators. There's not much to do to try to serve them. I wouldn't worry they're too much. The interesting thing is that in Europe, for example, we operate all over Europe, and there we are partly owned by Suez, which is a big waste management company. They are not just big incinerator operators, but also big recyclers, right? So I wouldn't spend really your time thinking about how to serve the linear system that is exiting. I would just, not even put any amount of your energy into it. What's much more important is to understand why someone would want to use an incinerator versus a circular solution. The stakeholders, especially brands, retailers, being in such a model, the two most important. And what really drives recycling today globally is not the capability to recycle something. It's not the infrastructure to do it. It's the economic equation underlying it. What makes something, recyclable is if a garbage company can make money, and what makes something not recyclable if a garbage company can't make money. And by the way, COVID is going to, completely decimate the recycling industry, which has already been going down over the past 10 years due to low oil prices. COVID is going to be horrendous for it because oil is going down even more and maintaining at those low prices, and that makes recycling business models very non-competitive. So no, it's important to keep that in the back of mind. I'm sorry?
I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that part.
Oh, let me sort of double click for you there. So what people tend to think makes something recyclable is the capacity to do it. Like, is there the technology to do it? And then is there enough capacity to do it? Those are usually the two big topics that are discussed. But unfortunately, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the business model of, is it profitable to bother recycling something? So what makes something recyclable? I'll put up a sort of a slide for you if I can try to find one very, very quickly here. Hold on, let me get you something from a presentation we were just giving that will, I think, really clearly explain this. Sorry to take a moment here. Boom, boom, boom. This one, I think, does it well. Yes. Okay. This happened, we were just with Procter & Gamble an hour ago. I mean, there's nothing confidential I'm going to show you here, but this just happens to be, oh, can I get screen share enabled for me, please?
Let's see. Hey, Mohit, how do you share the screen share thing? Oh, here we go.
I'm saying the host has to enable it for me, it's saying. Now it's doing it, super. So here's just some PNG cosmetic packages. It's not relevant, what they are, but what makes something recyclable, which is in green, is that equation you see there, which is after the cost of collecting and processing, if there is value, if the value is greater than the cost of collecting and processing. That's what makes something recyclable. What makes something not recyclable is the inverse, if the cost of collection and processing is more than the value recovered. Those are things like tubes or sachets or aerosols. Now, what drives value is the price of oil. If oil is low, value goes down. If oil is expensive, value goes up, because what is plastic? It's oil anyway. And if your raw material is cheap, the output will be cheap. And inversely, the raw material is expensive, the output will be expensive. So that is the fundamental backbone of it all. And during COVID, oil prices are really bad. I mean, if you look at a historical oil price, let's see if I can get you I'll try to find it while we're chatting here, but a chart on that. It's been bad over the past 10 years, and recycling has really gone down over those years. To show you another sort of interesting data point, I'll try to pull another example up for you here very quickly, where over the past 10 years, recycling globally has been just crashing downward in a very, it has not been good. And let me see if I can find that for you. Hold on, this is not the right one. My apologies, opened the wrong presentation. We'll try this one. Here. No, sorry, we'll give me one more chance. If I don't find it, we will move on just for time. But here we go. I think this one will have that slide in it that I want to show you. Yes, it will. This is a really interesting data set. You can take screenshots of anything if you wish. This top chart here shows you, this is for the city of Philadelphia, but it'd be the same in Geneva, Zurich, it doesn't matter. The price the city used to get paid for its recyclables, like aluminum and paper, it used to get paid $67 a ton. Now it has to pay $105 for the same stuff to be recycled. What is the city of Philadelphia considering and likely going to do? Cancel recycling altogether. And that's happened over the past 10 years as oil prices have continued to maintain low. So if you look at, for example, oil prices, over the past, let me put it up for you here. This is oil over the past 20 years. Since really 2010, it has been at this, it's been sort of here between 2010 and 2004, then it went down. And look, since 2015, it's maintained at something that has been decimating recycling, half the price. And look at what's happened to COVID. It's now at a third of the price and maintaining there. If we just zoom into that, let's just zoom into that time frame. Look at what's happening. It's been bad, horrible, and it's just getting worse. And that is destroying recycling, like fundamentally destroying it. So that is what's going to, that defines the overall approach. So the important thing to think about, to answer your question on how do you engage the retailers and brands in circular systems, I think is one, to be very eyes open on not the purpose. I think the number one mistake social entrepreneurs make, and TerraCycle runs as a for-profit in 20 countries, as a non-profit in 2 countries, so I understand both sides of social entrepreneurship. It doesn't really matter whether you're a for-profit or a non-profit, that's just an incorporation structure. But we as social entrepreneurs tend to focus on going into stakeholders and convincing them to care about our mission. My mission is to eliminate the idea of waste. Your mission may be something different. Let's be clear, they don't give a fucking shit about the mission, right? That's not their mission. The mission of a store is sell more crap. The mission of a CPG company is win on market share, sell more goods. Now they would prefer to do that through good things than bad things, because evil people aren't that common. They're very rare, right? So people want to do it through good, but you need to honor their purpose and show them how they can achieve more of their goal by taking your tactics, right? And so an important part, if you want to establish, like for example, Loop, which is a reuse platform, it makes, packaging look like, let me see if I can show you an example just super quickly of what that looks like. It makes, it's somewhat, in the same vein of what you're describing for Switzerland, it makes packaging look like, say this is, Nestle now in reusable stainless steel. In fact, I'm actually eating ice cream. This is the thing live, and there's hundreds and hundreds of products, whether it's Tide. Why does a brand and a retailer do this? It's because, yes, they can create a sustainability solution, but fundamentally because they can innovate in packaging like they've never been able to innovate before, and not increase the price to their consumer along the way. That is way more of a carrot than we can solve the sustainability problem. So I would really focus in on these underlying business questions with those stakeholders and think about how to achieve more of their goal, whether you agree with their goal or not, through your approach. And forget who you disrupt. Let that go and don't even spend your energy on it.
Thank you.
Okay, Bob, you want to follow
Sure.
up?
Good morning, or wherever it is by you. My name is Bob Flax, and I just want to thank you for being here and thank you for your work. Very exciting.
Thank you.
So I'm the executive director of a nonprofit called Citizens for Global Solutions. We have consultative status with the UN and have been around since World War II. We're part of a network of about 30 organizations around the world, and were initially started essentially to prevent World War III, just after the war. And the thought about that is to do that by creating what's called a World Federation, to basically do with the world what Europe was trying to do with the EU. So to have a global parliament, a global constitution, Bill of Rights, that kind of stuff. So, so in the interim, though, we've accomplished a number of things. Probably the one we're both best known for is we were the main U.S. organization that helped create the International Criminal Court, pulling together the 120 nations and nonprofits that did that. So, so anyhow, so my question, I have 2 questions. I'll throw in about that, and you can have at it. Okay. So the so first question is, what do you do to work effectively across so many different countries and so many different cultures in terms of your messaging, your procedures, et cetera, or do you find that that's unnecessary, that you could use the same stuff wherever you go? So that's question 1.
Yep.
And question 2 is, what have you learned about shifting the global conversation around any particular issue, whether it be waste or whatever? What are the kind of generalizable lessons if you want to shift the global mindset? So take it away.
Question. Yeah, let me take question number 1. Now, remember, my expertise is in a very different domain than yours or your mission. Mine's all about waste and so on. So please note that my answer is bound in that.
Sure.
Also, the markets we work in today as a social business for-profit are developed countries, Canada, US, Brazil, Western Europe, China, Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. So that's where I'm pulling the answer from. And then we work as a nonprofit, as a public charity in Thailand and India. So that's my geographical. So for example, I don't have a touch on Africa and can't comment. But the biggest thing I've learned is that every time we open a new country, you know, or even deal with local teams, everyone always thinks everything is different. What I've learned in the topics I work on, it is absurdly the same. It is exactly the same, you know, everywhere. We're humans everywhere. We have the same motivations everywhere. In the end, you're flavoring for language and maybe slightly flavoring for culture, but even culture is very, you know, in the end, behaviors are very, very similar. You know, the toothbrush in China looks the same as the toothbrush in New Zealand. People can, you know, use it at the exact same way, more or less, right? The more you look at it, the more, and that's so important, because then what we do is to be able to run in 20 markets and do that efficiently. We have global leads for every one of our departments sitting in our headquarters, which just happens to be in New Jersey. And we push out standards, you know, through all the markets. So we can, you know, every time we make a change or come up with a new idea, a new process, we globalize it. And if the idea or process cannot really play in all our markets, we just skip it and don't focus as much on it. Because for us, we've luckily, knock on wood, been able to grow for 18 years in a row on any metric you want to look at, revenue, people, whatever it may be, right? And a big part of that has been keeping everything very standard and making everything as similar as absolutely possible. And then if it can't do that, if the idea is only relevant, say, in New Zealand, or only relevant in whatever Canada, we likely won't execute it. And we'll make the decisions based on what can be, our decisions really focus around what can be big and global. Those two things are very important to us. We want to make sure that anything we do can grow and be global. We also try to only focus on projects that, once we get them up and running, create consistent revenue, versus things that we launch, you know, like more consultative, where we do something, then, you know, then it concludes. Everything we do is all about creating Lego bricks, if you will, that you can stack on top of each other when it comes to revenue. And that allows us to really, you know, deal with a thing like COVID. And we're gonna, you know, COVID is not good for my industry, but we're gonna maintain profitability. And we haven't had to lay off a single person, and we won't, you know. So, but that's because of resilience, in that everything is the sort of consistent standard approach. There's a lot of resilience in standardization, and we really gravitate towards it. And again, the more I've learned, the more that's not really a sacrifice. Your second question, sorry, I've just missed it because I was focusing on the first one.
Shifting the global conversation.
The global conversation.
Any particular issue. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, so it's interesting. I think a big thing that I've learned, even recently, is how much stakeholders value insights. Because they are, you know, if you're talking, let's just make it up to a brand. I'm just making up an example, you know, say whatever, Den and, you know, for yogurt. They have to be experts at many different things around the idea of yogurt, you know, from treatment of animals to farming practices to packaging to supply chain marketing. They have to be, you know, they have a broad need. They're not experts at any one individual category. And I, you know, many times I say we as social entrepreneurs, I specifically, you know, would assume that they are experts in my topic because it is a subtopic of theirs. And what I've learned is they're not, and they're craving a lot insights. Now, when you give them insights into your section, then they will lean into it and be like, great, now that you've told me the insights, how do I solve for those insights, you know? And it is really like a lubricator to move the discussion in wherever you want to take it, right? But that approach of leading with insights that are ideally third party, not your own, right? Insights that you've gathered through desk research or other organizations, so it has to really feel credible versus self-serving. That is a really good way to open the discussion. So today, you know, in the meetings we've had before this call, you know, we open up by sharing a lot of insights on what COVID is doing for recycling, reuse, and environment. And what are the stakeholders we're talking to doing? Saying, oh, great, we had no idea. We never thought about that. And now tell us how to solve for those. We say, well, funny you ask. Here's the answer, you know, and let's go through it. And, you know, they bite. It's a much, you know, it really helps the fishing. Another thing that could be interesting in your question is, you know, one of the things I've noted, you know, that I know we deal with as social entrepreneurs is the idea of sort of multi-stakeholder collaborations, getting lots of people to action together. I mean, your project and you know, is a massive global example of that, right? The global version of the EU. That platform loop is sort of an example of that, where we had to get a huge amount of brands together, a huge amount of retailers, vendors, and have them all behave together. And we've had some really interesting learnings on how to accomplish that. So I've sat through a lot of meetings where I'm invited in as an expert, and it's a multi-stakeholder collaboration, and we're trying to solve some big problem. And you know what it is, a bunch of sort of, round tables with stick-it notes and whiteboards, and we stick up ideas, and, sort of nothing ends up happening after. And it's a little bit challenging. One of the things we noticed in how to effectively run a multi-stakeholder collaboration at scale, and with big complex stakeholders, is to make it feel like a consortium, but not behave like a consortium, so that it's in loop. For example, we make all the decisions, whether people like them or not. We set we use big global events as deadlines. Like for us, Davos, World Economic Forum, is a big deadline. And we say, we are gonna have a press conference with these CEOs. We did it last time we did it with the CEO of P&G, Pepsi, and Greenpeace. And we say, there's this, big line in the sand. We got to get all this done by then. And that works incredibly well. And this idea of being able to not run by group consensus, but let's say, run with authority, with being informed by group, ideas, but not being driven by them, is very important, especially as you try to get a bunch of cats all moving in the same direction.
Great. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. All right, Katarina.
Hi, Tom. Hi, class. Thank you so much for finding the time and coming to our class. I didn't know about your work, but thanks to our fantastic teacher, I got the opportunity to read a lot about you and to watch many interviews with you and to understand the way you think and what the concept of your work is. Everything is really admirable what you do, but everything I watched and read brought me to a fundamental question, which I found a fundamental problem for me, which is the obsession that we have with shopping and with buying.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to know if your work and if your company is shifting the perspectives on lowering our obsession with buying of future waste. And if you don't think that maybe your work might also kind of give an excuse to people for buying more, because they feel like, okay, I buy more, it's fine because there is a solution.
No, you hit, I think, from an environmental point of view, right? I think, and it probably even echoes into social justice, but definitely from a planetary point of view, the number one enemy is consumption, period, by far. And I think one of the challenges, there's a big piece here, is that one of the things we have to honor, if I take examples of communication and compare how Fox News communicates, which mind you is the most popular media channel in the United States, versus how, say, NPR communicates, which is a public radio, which is what I listen to. And this is a challenge in how social entrepreneurs communicate as well, tend to be more like public radio than Fox News. What is really important is communicating with simple black and white messages, even if you sacrifice the subtlety, versus really giving honor to all the subtlety in gray, because then you never get to a black and white message. And if you think about, like, take ocean plastic, and I'm going to give you a long answer to this, but there's a couple, hopefully some gems in here, is that, there were scientific reports for decades explaining how we're destroying our oceans with garbage. But you know what got people to actually give a shit was a photo of a turtle with a straw up its nose. And suddenly there's a global pandemic about waste. And what it shows is we need, in focusing on purpose, to really hone the art of incredibly simple, direct communication that's black and white and punches in the gut, right? Versus honoring all the detail. Fuck the detail, focus on the actual step and create action, because the detail makes things confusing, complex, and lacks action. Now, to the point that you raised, why do I even say that? Is because the environmental movement is a complex topic. Try explaining palm oil to somebody and understand that what's even an alternative, right? Deforestation, animals, species reduction, there's so many complex topics, but the beauty of what you said is that everything emanates from the act of purchase, the act of buying something. Every environmental issue, bar none, is linked to the act of purchasing something, right? And that is a very simple thing to focus on, is this idea of what you said, how do we stop satisfying ourselves through consumerism? Now, the challenge in addressing that, and maybe COVID will help a little bit, but the challenge in addressing that is every business is in the business of making you buy things. So it's very difficult to go to a company and convince them to run anti-consumption messaging, like Patagonia famously did on "Don't buy this jacket," right? That is so difficult because it's like contrary to the reason of the business's existence. So, and we even struggle with that, and you're precisely right, where, you know, I can only convince, you know, say Haagen-Dazs to make the package I showed you by convincing them that they will sell more ice cream by doing so, right? Just let's call a spade a spade. Now, my hope is that you're not buying, this is how I self-justify it, and maybe bullshit, but I self-justify it by saying, well, I'm hoping you're not buying more ice cream, you're just choosing their brand over someone else's brand. I think that's true for things like diapers, toothpaste, shampoo, but for some things like indulgence, maybe it isn't. But generally, I think that's true, or maybe it's just me trying to sleep at night. But it doesn't address the fundamental issue of over-consuming. And that I think, have to address outside business culturally. And really make that a big talking point. So we try to do that everywhere we can, in the books we write, in the, you know, whenever I give interviews, you know, talking about that. We even, in the platforms we can control communication on, talk about anti-consumption messaging as much as possible. I think that is by far the biggest thing that we need to deal with, because, you know, I mean, even if you take something as simple as moving from, you know, coal energy to, let's call it like solar energy, the solar panels are still made from coal, literally, right? Solar panels, you know, will break, and you end up using more coal in the solar industry than the coal you offset by generating, you know, that power, right? So the answer is not coal or solar, it's less consumption. And I don't quite know the answer to how to make that really the new mantra. It can happen through business by things becoming very expensive. You know, I pray for expensive oil every day, right? It will solve every problem in the world. But that's, I think, the biggest thing we need to think about. And how do we make that popular for people? Because that has to be a people movement. I think it's very difficult for corporations to do that. You know, if I'd be the CEO of a company and I start putting out "Don't buy me" messaging, I would be fired, and a CEO would replace me who puts out "Buy me" messaging. So, you know, the question of the how is the important one, but the topic you raise is so critically important and the central issue in effectively every environmental topic by far. We live lives that are too big, and there's too many of us. Sorry?
Yeah, I agree with you very much. I just fear that in the current economic system that we have, it's not really possible to make any shift. And that's why I think your company, fortunately or unfortunately, will have a lot of work in upcoming years and decades, because this problem will probably continue.
But I think where we can, you know, I agree, you know, especially going into, well, a recession is good in a way because people will consume less, but they will, you know, be focused on things that are more, you know, in the hierarchy of needs. They're going to, you know, move away from, because caring about environment and these topics is a luxury, right? Now, where we can influence is culturally. We can start with ourselves, you know, we can become examples of how to not buy things. And then we can try to spread that and try to create a cultural shift, because the culture of mass consumerism, luckily, is a new thing. And now, what is not new is the idea of hoarding and having as much stuff as possible. Even thousands of years ago, the human being with the most cool stuff had the best life. And so that is, I think, and even animals will hoard everything. I wonder if that's just based in animalistic nature, but we have to solve it culturally. I don't have any profound answers other than to agree with you. And how do we get people to think about happiness in different ways?
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom. Let's go to Leipa.
Hi, Tom.
Hello.
Pleasure to have you here. I really appreciate your honest responses and just being straight to the point. And I wish I could just download all of your brain into mine. But for now, I'm just going to stick with the questions.
Please.
And first, I really agree what you said with consumerism. And I think a few months back, I wrote down on my notebook that I wish I had a job where I could sell anti-consumerism and still get paid and live by. So I'm still trying to figure that one out. But I heard some really great questions on the, let's say, business models or just advice from your experience. And what I want to tap into is more, let's say, personal questions.
Please.
Before I start, Shelly, how many questions can I ask? Because I have 5, as you know, so I have to prioritize the time.
And I can go a little longer. I know we had to stop a minute ago, but my next meeting is internal and they're giving me some flexibility.
All right. Let's do your top 3. And then if we have time for just one last question from Remy, then we will call it a day and bid Tom adieu.
Okay. Okay, so first question. Imagine that you're 19 again, where you're just starting your business. And what would you do differently? And how would that influence your business? What lessons do you think you would lose, or what lessons you would learn instead?
So I'm going to answer this two ways. The non-direct answer is that I think the more innovative the idea, the more mistakes and failures it will have to get to the right version of itself. So what I mean by that is it's really valuable to honor failure. The way to honor failure is to not have the necessary emotional reaction to it by being angry, but to, or negative feedback, but to really focus it as you just paid for tuition and try to learn as much from that as possible, and then to iterate. And usually the bigger, the more disruptive, the bigger the idea, the more of this shit you have to get through. And it's an indicator that you're onto something interesting. But you want to be really conscious to not have the emotional reaction, which to negative feedback, positive feedback feels great, but you learn nothing. Negative feedback feels like crap, but you can learn from it. And one of the things we tend to do, when we innovate a new idea, and we innovate new ideas all the time, is the moment someone says no, we say, we don't end the call. We say, okay, we know where you are right now. Now tell me all the reasons for the idea that you said no. And we keep the person on the phone for as long as we can saying, what were all the problems? Right? Because that is the best feedback by far, to be able to really refine that idea into something that's truly spectacular. Now, within that context, my specific answer would be the biggest thing I've learned in social entrepreneurship is to not lead with my mission when I talk to as third-party stakeholder. I used to go in, I'll give you an example. Let's do one on dirty diapers. I choose dirty diapers because dirty diapers are extremely expensive to collect and process versus their value. They're very bad on that economic spectrum. And we invented, through some incredible science, dirty diaper recycling over a decade ago. We went to the diaper companies, and that idea, the mission, gets us the meeting. And that's why it's a false positive, because you think the mission is everything, but it just gets you the meeting, right? And that's powerful, that's important. But when you're in the meeting, and we were explaining to the diaper companies, we've invented diaper recycling. Isn't it awesome? Shouldn't you care? Because 3% of landfills are diapers, right? And you know what the feedback was? Believe it or not, they're like, oh shit, if we launch diaper recycling and it's going to be expensive, first, the more successful it is, the more costs we'll get. And lawmakers are going to notice that and maybe even force us to do it in countries. Scary, super scary. So no, the answer was no. Then we reframed it. And I'll tell you how we reframed it, but the punchline is diaper recycling is now live, funded by Pampers in Amsterdam. And it's launching in a number of more European countries coming up. And it's become a major area that they are leaning into. But how and why? Now, first, just to paint you a little bit of a visual, let me just give you an example of what diaper recycling actually looks like. One moment. Oh, sorry, wrong deck. Here we go. I think I have a slide on what here it is. Okay, so this is diaper recycling. I will share it with you. So here is the diaper recycling in Holland. So think about every aspect, because what does Pampers care about? What do you think is their number one motivation?
Profit.
I guess looking good in front of customers.
Number one motivation.
Profits.
Profits. How do you get those profits?
By selling more.
Yes, their number one goal is sell more diapers. That's what you get the big promotion on, okay? Everything else is a function of getting there. Looking good may help them sell more diapers, but it's not the reason for being, okay? So these are these smart bins. So first, the actual location of the smart bin is either in front of retailers who will give Pampers incremental display space, or, my apologies, in front of nurseries who will switch from buying at bulk brand X to buying Pampers. So just the location of the bin drives sales. Then, what's the promotion for consumers? You download a Pampers app, you can proudly recycle any brand of diaper, and when you deposit the diapers in this bin, it weighs it for you, and for every kilo of diapers you put into the bin, you get coupons into Pampers. How many people would switch? That drives market share. And the moment you frame it like that, you know what they say? They go, oh my fucking God, you finally understand what will allow us to say yes to this and scale it. And it's like a big aha for me that after 15 years of hitting my head against the wall on, getting the meetings, but then either getting tiny, because here's the indication of when you failed at this. If the client says, I'm going to do your project because it's the right thing to do, you know what that's code for? I couldn't figure out any other reason to say yes to your project other than it's ethical. That's what that statement is actually code for. And we tell our sales teams always to not think that's good feedback, because you want them doing it because it fulfills their core purpose of being. If it's hotels, fill hotel rooms. If it's airlines, sell more, tickets, whatever it may be. Usually it's whatever drives profit, right? And if you do it that way, then they'll start saying, A, you understand us. Now we can say yes, because we're good people. We want to recycle diapers, but we have bosses who are going to push and so on. And it also allows the project to survive to the next person who will take the chair, who may not care so much and may only care about P&L and so on. And I wish I had told myself that, 20 years ago, because I would be much further along. And that is something we always try to teach, social entrepreneurs, but also team members, because we get a lot of team members who come join us because of mission, and they may lose or may not know how do you pragmatically, establish programs and that also survive and scale, because you don't want to keep fighting, to just maintain your scale.
Thank you for that. So I have two more questions,
Please.
hopefully. One is about, you talked a lot about innovation, and I wonder how you define innovative idea. How do you come about them? And what would you advise social entrepreneurs that are chasing those ideas?
Good question. So when we innovate a lot, and we always look for the following principles in innovation. It has to accomplish our mission. And that's just to create focus, right? We don't want to be too broad. So for us, our mission is to eliminate the idea of waste. And so we only do things that reinforce that. That's just to create focus. Then we look for things that no one else is doing at all, because that allows you to screw up. That allows you to have high margins. And those are critically important while innovating. You don't want to do anything anyone else is doing. So everything we do, we are by definition the only ones doing it. And that's really so that we have the flexibility to, because then no one's going to beat you up on pricing. So you have the flexibility to maintain whatever price you need to charge. And you have the flexibility to make mistakes, learn, and pivot, because there's no one who's going to be, competition takes two things away from you: the luxury of time and the luxury of margin. Both of those are degraded when there's competition, and the more competition, the more degraded those become. And the third thing is critically important, that the size of the market that it can address is massive, and to what Bob was asking earlier, global. Right? Because again, many times the problem is, if the problem is too small, it can never become big anyway. And you need big. Why is big so important? Because that's what attracts capital. Whether it's philanthropic capital or investment capital, no matter what, capital is attracted to things that can be big. And so those are and then the last thing is things that we can test cheaply and quickly. So I'm all about, have an idea, how do we get it out and test it within 30, 60, 90 days? And then iterate and iterate and iterate. And it can be anything. I'll give you an example of something where like take diapers to give you a sense of what's coming. We just signed one of our new divisions. It's not that public at the moment, but it's not confidential either, is our diagnostic division. We realized through, for example, reuse, that I have to have a direct relationship with everyone's individual products, right? If everyone in this chat is working with us on reusable, let's say, ice cream containers, I need to know which is yours, which is Chantel's, which is Joyce. I have to give you your deposits back. Okay, so then we start asking ourselves, what can we do with that? And we realized that certain waste streams carry diagnosable samples in relatively pure form. Your child's diaper carries a relatively pure fecal sample. Your femcare product, like a tampon, carries a relatively pure blood sample. And in fact, menstrual blood, which is more rich with information than just like pulling blood with a needle. Your air condition filter carries samples of the garbage in your air. Your water filter, samples of garbage in your water. In every one of these cases, we've now signed with the biggest brands in those categories, where you'll be able to say in 2 years from now, send in a diaper, and we'll send you back a medical report on your child's health based on the microbiome of the fecal matter. that's an now that's an innovation, right? But what am I testing against? A, is anyone doing it? Absolutely not. You know, B, can I test it fast? Yes, you know, and I'm trying to only, it's another key, I do only what is missing. So for example, in the diaper example, I'm not going to promote it. I'm going to attach it to a big diaper brand, let them promote it with the credibility and capability of their megaphone, which is bigger than I will ever build. All the logistics and processing, we use third parties. The laboratories, we use third parties. So we're just really, in that example, spinning a supply chain around and always trying to do as little as possible, because that will affect low cost to test the innovation and high chance of success, right? And you get something like that, you know, and that's just one of many. But those principles, because many times I've noticed, especially in social entrepreneurship, the social entrepreneur just wants to do everything themselves because they say, well, you know, I don't want to work with Walmart because they have problems, or I don't want to do this because they have. So I'm going to make everything myself. And that's a recipe to stay small.
Great answer. So the last one then is more about failure or hard times. So imagine you're having the worst week in TerraCycle, and how do you get through? What keeps you motivated?
I think that's one of the amazing things about mission-based companies is the mission is highly motivating. You know, there's purpose. You're doing more than just getting rich if you're a social business for-profit. And that is a great motivator. And I really desperately try to focus, and it's hard in those downward times, on what can I learn from all the reasons things aren't working out. It's so hard to do, but then you can start shifting into what can I change and how can I iterate. Right? And if you focus on failure as learning, please view it. Every time we have a failure, I sort of view it as I just invested, could be whatever, $500,000, $250,000 into education. It's like tuition, right? And in tuition, you pay and you accomplish nothing other than learning. You don't build anything in a class. You don't, your homework isn't ever, you know, seen by anyone other than the teacher and then discarded, right? So you're not being productive per se, but you are learning and you're paying money for that learning. Business and failure is just a greater expression of the same idea. And then it keeps you in a positive frame, because I've noticed this especially, and I say this, I'm originally European. I live in the United States now, but I've learned one big thing from the United States and why it is such a bastion for entrepreneurship. Maybe we'll conclude on this because I'm now just unfortunately horribly over on time, is what America does incredibly well. And Europe and other countries need to learn, you know, and especially countries like Japan is the worst at this, is this idea of looking at everything from an optimistic point of view and looking at failure from an optimistic lens. We need to teach this all the time to our European colleagues and keep reteaching it, because it's not innate, you know, to that culture, and other cultures are even more the case. But you need to have, to succeed in these things, especially in dealing with incredibly difficult issues, as social entrepreneurs do, you need to have that crazy cowboy optimism, you know, baked in and thrive off it. And, you know, American culture is a definition of that. There's many problems with American culture. You guys all know it, so we don't have to go into them. But that optimism is something that I always wish upon all of my team members around the world. And there's certain countries, I come from Budapest, Hungary, where it's an innately pessimistic country. And you know what we teach mostly to our local teams is not how to do their jobs or anything, optimism. We literally have optimism classes. Because if you look at things positively, you're going to look at things on how can you solve, versus if you look at them pessimistically, you're going to look at why they will fail. And you know what? If you have that pessimistic outlook, the world will manifest negatively around you. And if you have the optimistic outlook, it will manifest optimistically around you. And there's so much truth to that. And especially when you're solving, you know, I sit, the World Economic Forum has this great group of social entrepreneurs through the Schwab Foundation. And these are people who've built amazing NGOs around the world, whether for-profit or nonprofits, but social entrepreneurs. You know what the biggest challenge they deal with is chronic depression. You know, even they've had suicides in the group. It's really, you know, quite something. And a big part of that is in social entrepreneurship, you know, you're dealing with such horrible issues, and the issue may be getting worse as you're trying to fix it. It's like taking one step back and then the hole gets 10 times bigger, you know? It's even more important in this world, you know, where you may be dealing with a problem, you know, that is, you're like addressing a little bit of it, but the problem is exploding simultaneously, and that can be phenomenally depressing. So if I can encourage anything, it's really, you know, whatever makes, you know, can create that for you, that optimism is so important. And to look at every negative as what can I learn? How can it be an opportunity? You know, not as a, as a failure, you know?
Crazy.
And with that, sorry folks, I'm just so over time. My other meeting is bugging me here on the back.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you so much.
My pleasure.
I can't say enough. It's just been awesome. Thank you for all of your time.
Well, thank you as well. I wish you a lovely weekend and good luck with your missions and everything you're doing. Thank you.
And
Thank
see
you.
you.
Thank you.